Okay, let's talk about it. It was a fair result. Listen, if you want to win football matches at this level, you have to try to win for 90 minutes and not 45. South Africa had the kickoff, okay, and then held possession for the first 4.5 to 5 minutes, almost by themselves, and barely progressed the ball forward. There was almost no movement off the ball, and I already knew that that was going to be a sign of things to come. Egypt, for the first few minutes of the match, completely laid off every single South African who had the ball. And that put them in this awkward position sometimes where they didn't know what to do because they were expecting pressure that never came. So men were standing still on the ball. I'm going to speak a little bit about this match. And I'm not going to speak about anything defensive because technically nothing went wrong defensively for Bafana Bafana in their match against Egypt. You know, the penalty that was given away, I think if that's not Mo Salah who goes down, that penalty is not given. So I don't consider that being something that necessarily went wrong for Bafana Bafana today. As a matter of fact, I don't think they did much wrong defensively at all. But I would like to speak about the attitude in the first 45 minutes when it comes to playing on the ball. And I'd like to speak about how they came out in the second half. Definitely stronger, definitely with a lot more intent. But football isn't played over 45 minutes. It's played over 90 plus. In this case, 101, I think it was. And you've got to maintain a certain level of intensity for all that time if you want to win football matches on this level. When you're given the amount of space that you have against a 10-man Egypt, firstly, when Egypt were playing with 11 men on the field, they were giving South Africa a lot of space. Then they drop a man. Okay, red card, completely deserved, second yellow just before the halftime break. They come out in the second half, a man down. South Africa's got all the space in the world and utilizes a fraction of it to try to mount an attack. I like to think about football in lines, okay? Particularly when attacking, when on the offensive, you've typically got about 5 lines that you're playing with that are going towards the opposition goal. All right? You've got an extreme left, you've got a left of middle, you've got center, right of middle, and an extreme right. Okay? You've got your 2 wingers down either side, 3 central midfield players generally speaking, regardless of whether you're playing with one in front in a 10 or one behind. It doesn't matter. I like to think of football in lines. Okay? The thing about an attack is that anybody can spot a line and anybody can defend a line. If I stand right in front of you and you're running right towards me, you're going to hit me and there's nowhere you can go. It's really easy to defend lines, and that's why nobody plays in lines. That's why you have things like overlaps. That's why you have things like diagonal runs, so that you can break the lines. And now I'm not talking about horizontal lines. This is often the way we speak about football in this day and age, and I've got nothing against that. I'm speaking about it from a different perspective. I'm speaking about vertical lines, okay? You break vertical lines by running diagonals, by running overlaps. Now you're putting 2 men on one line and you're forcing the defending team to pick one or to double team someone, and that's a difficult position to put someone in. But that's not what happened in this game against Egypt. Those 5 lines ran straight for the entire 45 minutes of the second half, 55 minutes of the second half. And that ends up being predictable. And then when they get frustrated because all their lines are being blocked, people end up taking Hail Mary shots from outside the box. Look, if you've got that talent, there's nothing wrong in utilizing it every once in a while. But you're utilizing it from the perspective of not being able to break down a simple line. And that's not good enough. You understand what I'm saying? The entire right side of the attack today against Egypt, particularly in that second half, was so flat. Are you telling me that against a 10-man Egypt in which there is so much space being left to the attacking team that you can't afford to advance one deep man all the way to the byline to try to create some extra space and get in behind Egypt's defensive line? Of course you can spare that man. particularly if you're chasing the game in the last, let's say, 10 to 15 minutes. All right. Now, the left side was a little bit more dynamic, right? And I respect that. But what happened very often that absolutely blew my mind is that offense would find itself in a position where it needs to break down the line, and then it would try an aerial ball in order to do that. Why are you trying aerial balls? We have never been an aerial team ever in the history of South African football. It's not something we're particularly good at. Yes, there might have been a time when you had Tawa Matoho in the side and he could do something for you with the head, but just because you can't break down a defensive line doesn't mean that you resort to something that you kind of famously can't do. You've got to keep that ball on the ground. The amount of time the ball went into the air for headers that were just not on against a really stout and disciplined Egyptian back line was so frustrating to me. And the few times the ball was played on the ground and kept on the ground when breaking into Egypt's penalty area, real opportunities were created. But for some reason, we start to panic. Okay, we start to panic at the edge of the area and start lifting balls on high. When we've only got, I think, one player over 6 foot in that penalty area to compete for that ball, it's a waste of time. And speaking of panicking, let's speak about the midfield. All right? Listen, we all know, okay, and let's be entirely honest. I'm 37 years old, and this is by far the worst South African midfield of my lifetime. As individuals. Okay, as individuals. All right, listen, I came up in a time where, we played with John Shoes Moshweo, Dr. Kumalo, Helman Mkelele in the midfield. All right, and yes, that was like a dream team. That was, the guys who went to the 1998 France World Cup and won the 1996 Africa Cup of Nations. Things haven't been as good since then, but still, we've managed to keep incredible midfields with Simpiwe Shabalala and Yeye Letholonyane and Dean Furman and Andile Jali and Tulani Serrero and Macbeth Sibaya. The amount of guys we have had in midfield, particularly central midfield positions, in my lifetime, who are star quality has been exceptional. And this team doesn't have that kind of individual quality. It just doesn't. But as a team, they're okay. As a team, they can play some football. They've proved that. Through qualification, they have proved that they can play some football. So why don't they play some football? It's my only question. Okay? So many high, long passes from deep, completely overriding what could have been a really progressive midfield attack and trying to get all the way straight to your offensive players on the edge of the area and giving them the responsibility and the difficult task of bringing the ball down and turning. Why? You guys can play, all right? Run the ball. You've got to be more comfortable with the ball at your feet and running the ball into gaps, which I will repeat again, there were plenty. I saw far too many balls today that tried to cut out a midfield that didn't even really exist because the game wasn't being played there to begin with. Okay? Second half, Egypt were playing with 10 men. So they were defensive, right? So when you're playing these long passes from the halfway line and you're playing them aerially to a crowded, 18, 16, 17, 18 guys at the edge of the area, what do you think is going to happen? Do you not think it might be a better idea to invite some pressure, draw the Egyptians out a little bit, and move the game towards the halfway line so that you can penetrate? All right? But in order to do that, of course, you're going to have to run some diagonal lines. You're going to have to run some overlaps. And if you're not willing to do that, then it's all going to be worth naught anyway. This was a really disappointing game for me. I don't know if you can tell. I thought Egypt was there for the taking. And with regard to the penalty, natural position as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So, Zimbabwe on Monday. South Africa now on 3 points. Egypt are through on 6. And Zimbabwe and Angola got a draw earlier in the day, which means they're on a point each. It's not copy and paste. It's not easy as pie. One would expect South Africa to beat Zimbabwe, as we did in qualifying, as we have many times over the years. But in this type of situation, there's a lot to play for. And if Bafana come out anything like they did against Egypt in the first few minutes this evening, Zimbabwe will see an opportunity. Now, I don't expect that to happen. I think the game will be played completely differently to what the first half was played like today, and I think South Africa will win. But I would advise against taking that win for granted. I would.